take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Take Flight Takeaways. I think this is episode number 92 in total, so we seem to be very fastly approaching episode 100. If you aren't aware by now, which hopefully you are, but Take Flight Takeaways, this episode is of course hosted by me, Shuwel, one of the 4 members of the Take Flight podcast team. These are short bite-sized episodes of around 10 minutes where each of us take turns to share some takeaways and learnings which we think would be of value to others. Now, in this episode that I have the honor of hosting, I wanted to talk about how exposure is expansion. Now, this is something that I've been discussing with friends recently and wanted to share with our community why I think it's important that we continue to be exposed to things to aid our growth. And with that, I wanted to share 3 examples which I hope demonstrate that point. Now, for this episode, for the first example of exposure leading to expansion, I need to go all the way back to when I was growing up. So, as a young child growing up in Portsmouth, for some of you that may not know, I'm the oldest child of immigrants who had migrated from Bangladesh. Now, throughout my childhood, growing up in Portsmouth in the UK, my mother always wanted me to stay local. She wanted me to stay in Portsmouth for school. She wanted me to stay in Portsmouth for college. She wanted me to stay in Portsmouth for university. She wanted me to work in Portsmouth and never leave. Now, in parallel, my dad, on the other hand, he was actually okay with me moving out and going further away from Portsmouth if the right opportunity became open to me. Now, I was quite fortunate during that time because, especially in the Asian community, there weren't so many parents that were willing to give that exposure to their children. But I was fortunate that my dad gave me that chance. So in the end, I went to university in London. And I remember on that day when I was leaving Portsmouth to go to university, I was very excited. But my mum cried so much on the day that I left. And yeah, it was a very tough moment, but again, I was really excited about moving to London and going to university there. Now, that move of going to London exposed me to lots of different people and also opened my eyes up to many different career paths as well. So it really did open up a lot of opportunities for me. This was one of my earliest experiences and signals of exposure leading to expansion. Another example I wanted to share of exposure leading to expansion is when I moved abroad for my career back in 2012. Now, again, to time travel a little bit, back in 2012, I was in London. I was finishing my final year of university. And at that point, all I wanted to do was live and work in London. I didn't want to do anything else, had zero interest to do anything else. For me, that was it. Because at that time, that had been all that I had been exposed to until I got the opportunity to move abroad to Switzerland in 2012. Now, I had the opportunity to move abroad for 3 months for a summer internship. I still really wanted to come back to London. So I thought, let's move for 3 months and see what happens. London, I'll end up coming back to anyway. Now, with that move, I actually got the first-hand experience of working in a multinational organization surrounded by many different nationalities. And I got the experience of living abroad for the first time. Now, this was not part of the plan. As I just mentioned, London was the be-all and end-all for me. But during that experience of being exposed to this international environment for 3 months, I realized that I loved it. And I realized how enriching it was for me to be in a different country, understand the different cultures, and also meet amazing people along the way. I was very fortunate that at the end of that 3-month internship experience, the company that I was working for gave me the opportunity to stay. That initial exposure of 3 months opened up a huge array of opportunities for me to grow professionally and personally on an international level. And that 3 months has ended up becoming 9 years today and spreading across Europe and Asia. And with me actually going into my 5th country relocation later this month. So do wish me luck with that. Now, on top of that, it's actually been a great way for me to travel personally alongside my career and given me the chance to visit 60 countries by the age of 30. None of this was part of any plan that I had back in 2012. Again, exposure to these experiences led to me to have the expansion of the life that I've been able to live. Now, the last example I wanted to talk about and demonstrate exposure to expansion is in real estate. So I bought my first property back in 2014. I was 24 years old and I thought I knew everything after buying my first home. This was a very big personal milestone for me, but it was only later on in 2018, so about 4 years after that, when I decided that I wanted to take it up a level and provide good quality homes at scale and grow. So around that time, it was when I exposed myself to a network of property developers and also gained mentors who owned and managed hundreds of units and had raised millions of pounds of financing through private investors by also creating systems and processes and really scaling their portfolio. Now, this really opened my eyes up to realize that I actually didn't know anything at all with regards to real estate. But that exposure led me to think bigger and reimagine what was possible. Now, in my investment company now, Ahmed Capital Group, I systemized the way that we work, also creating robust processes for identifying new deals, negotiating and buying properties, to renovating, refinancing, and finally finding and onboarding great tenants. And I've been able to do this by building a fantastic team around me, including my brothers, contractors, brokers, legal, tradesmen, etc. And now in the last 18 months, I've been able to go from a portfolio of around 300,000 to 1.4 million, with a deal now agreed to bring us to 2 million by the end of this year. Now, I would have told you this is crazy impossible to do on top of a career that I really enjoy, until I was exposed to people who are doing it. Now, for this current deal that I'm working on, I'm in the position of having to raise £160,000 within the next 4 to 5 weeks. And I know I'll be able to find the investors that want to work with me to do it within that time frame, because I've seen others do it. I've personally raised smaller amounts before in the past, and I plan on raising much larger amounts in the near future. This is all part of a wider journey. Again, exposure has led to expansion. Now, on that, a quick side note: if you or anyone that you know has money that you have sat in the bank collecting maybe 0.1 or 0.2% interest at the most, and you want to put that to work instead over a 12-month period for an interest rate which is much, much, much higher than what the bank is probably offering you, then do please connect with me on Instagram at Shuwel1 or LinkedIn Shuwel. So in summary, guys, exposure is expansion. You cannot become what you can't see, hear, or feel. Now, this is especially important for disadvantaged minorities who are having to play catch up, like the Bangladeshi community and other minorities. So we have really a lot to catch up. So in closing, my mum was crying a lot back in 2008 when I left Portsmouth for the first time, but I can promise you now she's smiling a lot more. So more life, more exposure, and more expansion to you all. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Take Flight Podcast. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to us on whichever platform you use. And for the people who listen on Apple, if you haven't left us a review, please do so, because this really helps us get more followers and more listeners. Thank you again for listening, and see you next week for another episode of Take Flight Podcast.
Take off, take flight with you. Yeah, for we never fly, but we're flying.